I've been using the Superstrike for the past 14 days, and today I'm gonna tell you everything about it. Is this thing really gonna make you a better gamer? Or more importantly, is it actually worth 180 bucks? Well, you better stick around and find out, because I'm gonna try my very best to cover absolutely everything. Before we get into the full review, I do want to quickly mention who I am. I'm a mouse enthusiast who's been active in the space for more than 8 years. I've owned over 100 mice and might care a little too much. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind when watching this video, since I might call out things that you probably don't even care about. And if you're looking for anything that's on my desk right now, it's all down in the description below. And also, as a quick disclaimer, this mouse was purchased by myself and my opinions really are as honest as they could possibly be. And I've also never had anything to do with the company in general. So if you want to show some support for the channel, definitely hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it to get notified for any upcoming reviews. And getting right into the unboxing experience, it is very plain with some cardboard. There's no excess of plastic, which is always nice to see. You get your USB-C to USB-A adapter with the receiver inside here. Here is the cable, which has not been changed. I can absolutely not recommend plugging in the mouse and playing it like that because it feels absolutely awful. The grips are somewhat usable if your hands are very sweaty, but other than that, they are very poor quality. You also do get an additional puck to install inside of the mouse with a skate installed as well, and that's pretty much it. In terms of the build quality, this mouse does indeed have a thinner top shell than your normal GPX. When actually squeezing the Superlight 2, you pretty much cannot feel the difference in terms of the actual rigidity of the top shell. However, one thing that you absolutely will notice is that this mouse creaks, especially under colder environments. Whenever I pick up my mouse and kind of press it into the side shell or the top shell or anything like that, you get those tiny micro creaks which just do not feel too premium. Now, despite it having a new click mechanism, it definitely still has some button wobble here towards the rear. You also do still have a bit of side-to-side movement, but there is no grinding, and honestly, there's nothing that has really annoyed me in-game personally. However, the scroll click just straight up stops actuating sometimes, which is absolutely annoying. The only way to use the scroll click consistently is to put constant downward force onto it instead of just using it like normal. So if you do not put a lot of pressure onto your scroll click, sometimes when using the scroll wheel in a game, for example, or just scrolling in your browser, it just straight up deactuates. The scroll wheel in general is also just very loose in there, and I can see it breaking faster than pretty much any other scroll on the market just because there is so much movement. The physical product just doesn't feel nearly as good as almost any other competitor in the space, even ones at much lower price tags like the ROM Leviathan V4, for example, which comes in around $70 US. As you might have seen on Twitter, some people even mentioned getting banned in-game, more than likely because of the rapid trigger system, but going off of the reports that we've seen so far, that just seems to be fake news. Getting into the weight of the mouse, please do keep in mind that weight is definitely subjective. My unit here with aftermarket skates comes in at around 62.6 grams, but one thing that is not subjective is the weight balancing of this thing. Because of the new click mechanism that just weighs a lot, the weight is absolutely shifted towards the front. Especially if I turn my mouse around here, you can see that the balance point is very far shifted towards the front. What that means is that because of the centrifugal force when swiping your mouse around with a lower sensitivity, the force just pushes the weight of the mouse outwards. So in games like Counter-Strike, for example, where I normally play with a 40cm 360, it just feels very sluggish, especially because of that big skate towards the front, whereas there is only a smaller skate towards the rear. Of course, you could install the puck, but that won't change anything about the weight balancing either. No matter what you do, it won't feel as balanced as a normal G-Preg Superlight, and that is definitely one of the bigger withdrawals besides the build quality issues. If you're a fan of mice below 50 grams, I definitely cannot recommend this thing. It just feels very sluggish, especially with the stock skates installed that we're gonna get more into later, because these just really did not hold up well. And getting into the shape and comparisons, obviously there's not much to talk about here because this is still the same mold ever since the original G Pro Wireless from 2018 launched. The shape is best described as good enough for most, but perfect for almost nobody. It is not catered towards a specific grip or hand size. It's just as basic as it could possibly be so that it's usable for the widest variety of people. And since shape is king, I'd almost always recommend you to go for a mouse that suits your hand and grip style instead of being influenced by marketing or hype. The way that I grip the mouse with my 19 by 10 centimeter hands and an aggressive pincer claw grip hybrid, I definitely do have enough space for my fingers on all sides of the mouse, and my thumb also aligns pretty well with the sensor here, as you can see. But because of its high button height and the way that the mouse is designed, it tilts my wrist upwards quite a lot. And for someone like me who has their wrist on their mouse pad, it just feels very unnatural to use. It's pretty much putting a lot of strain on my wrist by tilting it upwards so much. On more claw-focused mouse shapes and also low button height mice like the OP1AK for example, it feels a lot more natural to use because your wrist isn't tilted upward so much and your index finger sits a lot lower because of the lower button height. I would mainly recommend this to people who have already used a G Pro Wireless or any other mouse that came with the same shape and felt comfortable with it and never had any issues with it in game, or also just people who play a fingertip grip or hover their wrist or place it on top of the mouse instead of having it on top of the mouse pad. In terms of grip style and hand sizes, definitely make sure to check down the links in the description in order to find out how to measure your hand size and also to find out what your specific grip style is. But honestly, I cannot recommend it for anyone with 18 centimeter hands or below. It is a bigger mouse, and especially because it is so round and so much of a potato, it just really wants to eat up all the surface area in your hand. And for most people with average or slightly smaller hands, it is very unmaneuverable. The ratio of the mouse is also pretty off since it's definitely on the wider side, and it will just never be as intuitive to use and aim with as compared to something that is just better suited to your specific hand size and grip style. In terms of the coating, it actually feels improved over the Superlight 2C that I have here. It feels a bit more rubbery and a bit more grippy, even though I have really cold hands at the moment because of the cold temperatures here in my room. I personally didn't have any issues gripping it, so I would only say that you'd have to use grip tapes if you have super sweaty hands. In terms of the skates, these are aftermarket skates that I have installed here that I actually can recommend, especially for cloth pads. They're Unusual Weight Sports Magic Ice skates, and I'll link them down in the description below as well. As you can see on the base plate of the mouse, the ridges around the skates are now actually gone. So if you use softer mouse pads, the base will no longer dig into your mouse pad as it did with the Superlight 2, 1, or even the GPW. However, just because the ridges are gone does not mean that you can use any dot size, because the base isn't flat and there are still indentations for the skates themselves, so you'd have to either use Superlight 2 shaped aftermarket skates or dots that are less than 6.5 millimeters in diameter. Depending on what mousepad you use, the stock skates either feel slightly or a lot slower than 100% translucent PTFE skates. When I first unboxed the Superstrike, it really wasn't that bad, but they really did slow down after the break-in period. You might argue that the skate material they used, known as UHMWPE, is intended to be used on glass because of its quiet characteristics and also better durability on harder surfaces, but the material that they're using here is a lot softer than your normal UHMWPE skates, and they wear down pretty fast on even the smoothest glass pads. Here's what they look like after 2 days on the Glassworks Polarity, which is one of, if not the smoothest glass pads out there on the market. So the only recommendation I can give you here is to take off these skates, and if you're on glass, use any dot skate that you personally prefer, and if you don't know which one to go for, I'll link some down in the description below as well for you guys. And if you're on cloth, I can highly recommend you the Unusual Weight Sports Magic Ice skates for the GPX2, which I'm also going to link down in the description below. Alright, I think it's about time we address the elephant in the room: hits. First of all, what even is HITS? Well, HITS stands for the Haptic Induction Trigger System, which is a brand new technology developed by Logitech themselves. I will give them absolute all credit that they deserve for coming out with something new on the market and implementing a new technology that we've never seen before in mice. But the basic advantages that come with this type of system is customization of the actuation point, rapid trigger, which we already know from Hall effect keyboards, and customizable feedback because of the haptics. Logitech boasts that you will be able to click 20 to 30 milliseconds faster just by buying this mouse, and in order to find out whether that's true or not, I tried my best to give it a go over the past 2 weeks and compare it to all other mice I have here. And I can already tell you that one of them is pretty much the same in terms of the actual results. In terms of my in-game experience, on actuation point 1, you can definitely control your aim better with a looser grip and actuate the click with much less force compared to a conventional micro switch. I did struggle at the lowest actuation point and I never fully got used to it and had the occasional misclick that revealed my position to the entire lobby. So realistically, especially in a competitive environment, you're going to be using actuation point 2, which is definitely going to be a bit slower when comparing it to the almost instant actuation of the lowest setting. But besides hits, almost everything else about this mouse is just objectively bad, especially at this price point. The overall quality, the weight balancing, and almost any other physical aspect of the Superstrike is straight up inferior to mice that cost less than half as much. And if you want to know more about gaming mice that are actually worth your money and might actually make you a better gamer because they're suited for your specific hand size, grip style, and personal preferences, it's about time you hit that subscribe button and check out some of my videos, because I'm willing to bet there's a whole world of incredible mice that you've never heard of. Getting into the bump test that we talked about in my initial impressions, my opinions still are the same. So if you want to check out that test and the results of that and how it actually works, definitely make sure to check out the link in the top right corner. The main result we got from that test is that the actual force required to actuate the mouse button on the lowest actuation point is of course going to be a lot lower than a standard mechanical or even an optical switch. But what that also means is that if you put some force into your click, you're not going to be any faster with the Superstrike. So with a really good reaction time, good technique, by preloading your mouse button or simply just using a lot of force when you actually click your button, you're going to be just as fast, if not faster, than your Superstrike. Getting into any CPS test or clicks per second, I did click slightly faster when clicking normally with the mouse button, because you kind of find that actuation point where you just vibrate around it and it feels very consistent. Especially if you use the rapid trigger functionality, it feels a lot more consistent to spam click than with a normal mechanical switch. However, the results are pretty much the same when jitter clicking, as you can see on screen. You also can definitely drag click the mouse, so if you want more consistent drag clicks, this might be an upgrade to you, but don't expect it to instantly up your CPS by more than a few clicks. Because at the end of the day, there is still a 30 millisecond debounce after the press on all Logitech's main lineup mice, and that's including the Superstrike. So at some point you're just gonna hit a wall. In terms of the human benchmark, I did a bunch of tests for an entire hour straight. I took all of my top 5 results for all of the mice that I tested, put them into a spreadsheet, and here are the results. On SPDT switch implementations, just like the OP1AK for example, the difference is insanely minuscule, and the only reason why the Superstrike is ever so slightly faster is because it requires a slightly less amount of force in order to actuate the switch. But compared to normal mice like optical or normal mechanical switches that are not SPDT, there is definitely a difference. In terms of third-party testing, absolute reaction time gods like Pandaling, for example, have tested the Superstrike compared to other mice with SPDT switches, and just like I got my very similar results with the human benchmark test, there was virtually no difference. So with proper technique and a consistent reaction time, yeah, you're probably not going to benefit from it. We still don't have any super reliable scientific results in yet, so definitely wait for that before you go post your angry comment about Logitech's marketing being true because you scored 20 milliseconds better on a human benchmark. I do know that AimAdapt and some other people in our community are currently working on a testing contraption, since XLAT won't be any help for us with this type of system. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the data is gonna be like compared to the exaggerated marketing from Logitech. So here is how to actually benefit from hits. The main benefit that you can get from the haptic induction trigger system is an improvement to your tension management. By lessening the force that you need to actuate your click, you can relax your hand more when aiming, which can be a huge benefit to your aim. If you want to know more about this, Viscos has made an amazing 20-minute video on this topic. I'll link it up here in the top right corner and also down in the description below. And honestly, if you'd start aim training with benchmarks and routines and also implementing advice from that video, you're almost guaranteed to perform better on your mouse that you own right now than just going ahead and buying a Superstrike and throwing money at your issues. So if you do want to get good, here's another video in the top right corner that I'd highly recommend you to check out, but you should also definitely make sure to stick around for the end of the video in order to find out whether this mouse is actually for you or not. And now to what I consider being one of the most important questions about this entire topic. Hits versus SPDT. What is the future for gaming mice? Well, in order to answer that question, let me first explain to you what SPDT even is. Compared to a normal mechanical switch, the SPDT switch has a top contact plate and a bottom contact. And thanks to having those two contact points, the firmware can actually actuate your click as soon as the contact point goes from the top plate and starts moving. This way, the click doesn't have to wait until it actually touches the bottom contact like on a normal mechanical switch, but it can just actuate instantly. Some examples of mice that use these type of switches would be the Sora V3 or the Donizio 10 or 10 Air, pretty much any recent G-Wolf's mouse, the CR Draco Co1, and the most popular one being the OP18K and the XM2 8K from Endgame Gear, with the V2 version having a bit of a lighter switch that makes it able for you to actuate it even faster. The main advantage that Hits has over this type of system is the customization. With Hits, you can customize your actuation point, you can enable rapid trigger, which is simply not possible on SPDT switches, and you can even customize the amount of feedback that you want. Since SPDT switches are super easy to implement in mouse designs because all you need to do is adapt your firmware, I do think that this is going to become the new standard. We might get other systems with actual customization similar to Hits, but I think for most people, and especially most mouse designs, this just makes the most sense because the entire Hit system weighs so much, and you're also not ever going to be able to have a really low button height with this type of system because it takes up so much space at the moment. We might get similar systems from other Chinese companies or whatever down the road, and maybe even by the end of this year, but I don't think we're gonna get so much customization like Hits. But in terms of the main benefit, which is just the reduction in click latency, we pretty much already have that. In terms of the rest of the buttons, they're pretty much the same. The side buttons are still pretty mushy, but they're definitely a bit better, especially compared to the original Superlight. There's definitely some post-travel going on and definitely also some pre-travel, but overall, they are usable. But I would definitely not call them high quality. The scroll is now a lot more tactile and actually sounds pretty grindy. And the scroll click, as I've already mentioned, is indeed faulty. So if you ever loosen the pressure of the scroll click, it will just instantly deactuate even though the plunger has been pressed down. At least the scroll click isn't too heavy, and I would actually call it a bit more spammable. And yet again, here is a full sound test. If you do not know what sensor position is and how it actually affects your aim, make sure to check out the link down in the description below. But basically it is centered around the grip width of the mouse, which is a bit more towards the front, and overall the placement is very nice. In terms of the battery life, I would definitely not say that it's as good as the original Superlight and also not as good as the Superlight 2. I do assume that the whole induction system and also the haptic feedback does require some power, especially if you use the stronger force feedback options. So whereas I could use a Superlight 2 for around 1.5 weeks on 2K polling, I might be able to use this for exactly a week on 2K. In terms of the software, there is no web driver so far, and I would just recommend you to download the onboard memory manager. On the left side, you can change how many DPI profiles you want. I normally just set up one slot with my preferred DPI, which is 1600. When having advanced turned on, you can also change your liftoff distance, which only affects it very minimally, and I don't really notice a big difference compared to other mice. But if you are having tracking issues, I can definitely recommend you to set it to the high option. And if you have further tracking issues, especially on very tightly knit or very fast mouse pads, you're gonna have to turn off onboard memory, head into your mouse, then go into the gaming surface mode and set it to off. I do actually own two very tightly knit prototype mouse pads that this mouse had severe tracking issues with. You can also customize your buttons here and also use G-Shift in order to do button combos. There's also B-Hop mode, which I can recommend if you jump with your scroll wheel and you want to make sure that you don't accidentally jump while slamming your mouse on the desk. You can set your wireless polling rate up to 8K, but wired only goes up to 1K. And here in the right section, you can see my personal hits settings. You can customize your actuation point from 1 to 10, with 1 being insanely sensitive and 2 or 3 being a bit more usable. You can enable or disable rapid trigger and set it to 5 different types of settings, but I would personally recommend you to use rapid trigger on the setting 1 because that is what felt the most consistent for me personally. And then for the click haptics, I have it set to 1 on my left click and to 3 on my right click because I like my right click to be a bit more pronounced, and that's pretty much about it. There is no sensor rotation, there is also no web driver, you cannot change your liftoff distance in 0.1mm steps, at least there's XY split for DPI, but other than that, the settings are still a bit lacking. Now, to the conclusion, who is the Superstrike for? This mouse is for GPX or GPW owners that want custom actuation point, rapid trigger, or adjustable feedback. It is also for competitive players who are willing to adjust to a new shape, weight, and size in order to improve their aim by improving their tension management or simply want a lighter click. And it is also for casual gamers or anyone who wants a silent mouse switch and don't mind spending 180 bucks just for that. This mouse is not for people who don't like the GPX shape or just couldn't get used to it, people who prefer smaller and more maneuverable mice, people who like lightweight mice, people who are affected by an unbalanced weight, those who want their scroll wheel and scroll click to work especially over time, and most importantly, this mouse is not for people who want a mouse that is intended for their specific hand size, grip style, and personal preferences. Now you might say, but all the pros are using it, I need this mouse, it must be better. Imagine your entire life depends on milliseconds because you play at the highest level imaginable, and a company comes in and promises you to click 20 to 30 milliseconds faster than their enemies thanks to their new mouse. You're almost definitely gonna say thank you Mr. Logitech and use it because it's gonna give you an advantage. When it comes to my personal experience, no matter how many cool moments I have had where I could fully relax my index finger and react quickly with my click, thanks to that super low actuation point, I was just never fully comfortable with this mouse, not only because of the shape that angles my wrist upwards so much, but also because of the skates that just kept getting muddier. And also the weight that just felt so poorly balanced and front heavy, especially when playing a lower sensitivity on a game like Counter-Strike. Another question is, should you buy it? If you're already using a Superlight at a very high level where milliseconds actually matter and you want to improve your aim by having a looser grip, and you can also comfortably afford a mouse that's worth 180 bucks, then yes, you should definitely buy it. But if you aren't used to the shape or have tried to get used to it in the past without any success, don't expect this to be any better. Shape is king, and that will forever stay the same. No matter how high-tech your running shoes are, you're still not gonna be as fast as your dailies that are perfectly shaped to your feet. I forced myself to use this mouse for 2 weeks straight, and as soon as I swapped over to a mouse that I have never touched before, I just played so much more comfortably and hit so many better shots, just because this mouse is actually made for my hand size and my grip style. Not only that, but it's also at a weight that I personally just straight up prefer, and I didn't even notice a difference about the clicks just because everything else felt so much more in tune with the way that I aim. In terms of price to performance, it is pretty doo-doo fart. Putting hits into a mouse design that was originally created in 2018 for a mouse that used to have side buttons here where the bulge is like swapping a 2JC into a Trabant. It might be fast, but you're never gonna know when your seat is gonna fall through the floor. Or in the case of Logitech, when your scroll wheel is gonna shit the bed. I yet again want to thank Logitech for coming up with new mouse tech, and I definitely do appreciate them for pushing mouse technology, but that's really about it for this video. Definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in mouse reviews or even Hall effect keyboard reviews, and I'll see you guys pretty soon. Peace out.